He still remembers the exact spot where the shadow so familiar. My mom was able to hold a state of bliss for a fraction of a second before becoming disillusioned by the impossibility of its reality. Leaning back into my room, she denied what we had heard, describing the sound as nothing more than a dog bark. Though, I don't think it would have changed things if I told her this. What she didn't know was that I could hear the house prior to that incident. Things had been happening around the house while she was at work. I was secretly excited to be with her and made me call. I was hoping that this was a chance to confide in her about everything that had been happening around the house. About what we actually heard made me think that she would believe whatever I told her. I tried to explain that I heard my dad on my shoulder while I was doing homework at the kitchen table. The inquisitive used to give me all briefly inspecting my work in passing. It was his hint that I better reject my answer. The first time it happened at the new house, the sound from the register keypad reading after correcting the error, that's when I remembered I was home alone. It made me feel melancholy, a rare memory that made me genuinely miss my dad. Early one morning before my mom left for work, she woke me up and told me not to use the bathroom sink until she got home. She was running late for work and one of her earrings had fallen down the drain. Lifting my hand out from under the covers, I gave her a thumbs up before falling back asleep. The next time I was woken up, it was by my alarm clock signifying the start of my morning routine before school, beginning with my visit to the restroom. When I sat down, I remembered what my mom told me earlier. At my height at the time, the counter of the sink is about neck level. After I got up, I walked over to the sink to see if my mom's earring was visible from the drain hole. Turns out, the earring was very easy to spot because it had somehow moved out of the drain pipe and was now resting in the bowl of the sink. I carefully reached injustice that deserved acknowledgement. I made it a point to interrupt the greeting that she'd recite when the phone connected. I asked her if she was aware that she'd got the strings in the basement light tangled on itself again. After a short pause, my mom admitted that she hadn't come home that day. Apparently, for the last few months, she'd been seeing a guy off and on at work. It had been over a year since my dad's passing by then, but I was still shocked to hear that she was dating again. That night, she came home early to discuss her new relationship with a man named Brian. The heartfelt plea that she made to obtain my well-wish enlightened me on what it was like to be lonely. We both cried during the conversation, but when she was done, I no longer had the arguments I compiled in preparation for our talk. We watched a movie together, and she joked with me in my doorway before I fell asleep. The whole time, I was happy for my mom, but her good news made me hesitant to talk about my loneliness and what I was dealing with there. Positive nights with my mom were rare, and I thought my news would ruin the mood. In the morning, my mom had breakfast ready for me and walked me to the bus. What used to be a regular morning routine became a cherished surprise. She'd be gone when I returned from school, and when I opened the front door, the cold gloom of an empty house was there to meet me again. It became normal for me not to see my mom for days at a time. The house was always stocked with food, and I never went without, but she was now splitting her hours in her addition behind. At school, the kids started to make fun of me because my clothes were dirty. I worked doing laundry for weeks, just so I didn't have to go into the basement. Apparently, my hygiene became noticeable enough to warrant the attention of my vice principal, who pulled me into his office during recess to ask how things were going out. Not wanting to get my mom in trouble, and having more unwanted attention on me, I lied, told everything was joyful to my home. When he asked about my dirty clothes, my excuse was that our washing machine was broken. It just arrived. I gave him the widest and brightest smile that I could muster, and with that, they let me go back home to recess. The children around me were always so ecstatic near the end of the day, in anticipation of the bell to ring for everyone to file out of the classroom and go home. I felt the opposite. I felt echo through the elementary school hallways, especially knowing I had to be dressed in a clean outfit when I showed up the next day, to risk the patience of already concerned faculty. This meant that I had no choice but to go down into the basement that night to run a cycle of laundry. Gathering my clothes into a basket, I turned on every light in the house and unlaced an old pair of shoes. I tied the ends of the laces together to make one long rope. Then I threaded it around a cabinet handle, tying it each time it came around. Then, after opening the basement door, I do the same thing to the door handle there, wrapping the Put my back against it and felt my weight. I felt an impact from the other side to almost notice forward. The door was pushed out about an inch before it slammed shut again. If I was pressed against the door like I was, the hit or the source or a wide way. That realization made me growing emotional to my adrenaline and keeping at bay. They sunk me to the ground, and I sat, sobbing into my lap, while supposing the door getting pushed from the other side. Like an inside laundry basket, and I could reach from where I was sitting. That night, I cried myself to sleep on the kitchen floor. few times with gifts for me. It was nice to have a full house again, even under such circumstances. When he came over, he would sit in the chair next to the couch that I was laying on, keeping me company if I was awake. The strong, empathetic nature of Brian made me feel safe. I could fall asleep easily when he came over. Then it dawned on me through a dream. I needed to tell Brian what had been going on in the house. He'll be able to retain the information with an unbiased filter. When I woke up, I heard him and my mom talking in the kitchen. They'd almost pulled the covers over me to go in there. But as I listened to what they were saying, their words had me frozen. I heard my mom's soft voice say, "Kill her now." And Brian's low, rough voice replies, "Kill the girl." They repeated those phrases back and forth to each other. The soft, monotone way that they were talking to each other was so eerie and bizarre. Slowly, I turned my body to look over the arm of the chair, and as I lifted my head, their voices stopped. When I fully looked into the kitchen, nobody was there. A few minutes later, Brian and my mom would walk inside with groceries for the night. I pretended to be asleep when I heard my mom's keys jingle on the door handle. The next time Brian sat down by the couch, he took the opportunity and first tested the waters by asking if he believed in ghosts. Brian smiles big and says, "Yes, I do." Then he asks, "Why?" I told Brian everything, and he sat there calmly, listened until I unloaded all of the stories of horror that had been cluttering my life. When I was done, he gave me a hug. He stood up. He grabbed his car keys. Before my mom was done preparing dinner, Brian was back inside with a stack of books about ghosts, demons, how to ward off evil. He got my mom involved, and she was more open to the idea of escaping his mouth. She wished to enjoy my stories, but she also felt a sense of embarrassment that I hadn't told her any of it. I can't be sure if everything changed after that because Brian came into our lives. The house wasn't so empty anymore, or if it was the mixing with me, the things I was doing that I thought were keeping me safe, the crystals, all of that stuff. I had no idea if any of it really works, but something about believing that it would really helped. I haven't messed with any of that stuff since I was a kid. Once I felt like I got over it, I didn't feel the need to dabble in it anymore. Though I'm still super interested in all of it. Okay, I'm going to tell you about my night shift at the county morgue. We aren't a huge place, but we always have at least 9 or 10 bodies at any given time. I'm sure you've seen the cold storage cabinets on TV. Those things. At first it's kinda creepy, but you get adjusted to anything. My first week, I didn't want to eat in that same room. By the end of my first month, I was eating my sandwiches 5 feet away from bodies. It's just what happens. One night, we got a John Doe. The body was found in the woods, and animals had started feeding on it. The damage was extensive.